Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this evening's meeting of council. You're all aware, there's no public here, but you're aware that we're being recorded and maybe broadcast on YouTube. So we will get straight in. We'll start off with apologies from the apologies.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. We've got apologies from Councillor Ellis, who's at a conference, Councillor Maynard, who is on holiday, Councillor Turnbull's on holiday, and Councillor Brigham is unwell.
Are we minded to accept those apologies? Moving on to item 2, declarations of interest. Is there anything anybody would like to declare? Councillor Butterworth.
In view of the declare a personal non-pecuniary interest, would be the former member of the Longlands District Council, and this went on ad infinitum. But I think, given that the agenda covers the flooding of the park, which we acquired from Longlands Council and Council as a neighbour, because of the completeness, we just probably discussing this. We are mentioning the soil relocation, which is an ongoing negotiation with Normans, and 2 further transfers of land. And given that I particularly was involved in the park as a councillor in both capacities, I think it's right that I do declare that as a unusually as a former member of the Normans Council.
Okay, thank you. Any others?
I think Carl's guidance on this one. Should I declare non-pecuniary interest? The fact that Terry would look after the flooding on the road as such, not in the park, but as it's attached to look after the flooding.
So, Madam Mayor, Councillor Heritage, I think it wouldn't harm to declare a personal non-pecuniary interest in relation to your partner and her role on the county council, if you wish to.
So, if that's all right, I'll let Carl's produce it.
Okay, we'll move on to item 3, which is Mayor's report and urgent items. Items.
None, Madam Mayor.
I'll just say a few words really quickly just to cover off. We've had a couple of really successful events. We've had the Queen's Jubilee, obviously, and the Summer Carnival. The weather was better, certainly, for the first than the second, but I think both well attended and enjoyed by everybody. We're hosting Ulsai mayoral party in a couple of weeks' time, which is a busy weekend, and of course the Highland Gathering the same weekend. Also, just a reminder, the Mayor's Quiz Night is on the 16th of July, and we really appreciate your support at that to raise funds for my charities. Okay, going on to item 4, public questions in accordance with Standing Order 32.
None received.
None received. On to item 5, questions which have previously been submitted by members of the council. Do we have any?
Again, none received.
Thank you. Item 6, the minutes of our previous council meeting held on the 9th of May, which was circulated with the agenda. If everybody's happy, has any comments on those at all? If you need to sign those as a true record. Moving on to item 7.1, minutes of committees and working parties reporting to council. For 7.1, if I could ask Councillor Frederick to present those to us, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to present the minutes of the Corporate Policy and Finance Committee held on 15th of June 2022. There was one recommendation to council regarding the year-end accounts, which is covered by agenda item 8.10 later in the meeting.
Great. Item 7.2, if I could ask Planning Committee minutes, if I could ask Councillor Cowley to present those.
Please be at a table where I won't get my knees standing up to get these ones. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm pleased to present the minutes of the Planning Committee meetings held on the 5th of April, the 26th of April, and the 7th of May, and the 7th of June that I can recall them.
7.3 minutes of the Rothamsted Park Flood Management Task and Finish Group. If I could ask Councillor Buttery to present that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Our pleasure in presenting the minutes of the Park Flood Management Task Finish Group. In fact, the last meeting of that group on 19th May, and I think you and fellow councillors will have found a small contribution from that working party in this budget consideration later.
Okay, on to agenda item 8. 8.1 takes us to the forward plan and resolution tracker, which is on page 11 of your pack. I think the clerk has a few updates in the next take us through this.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to jump straight to the resolution tracker on what's his page 14, I believe. There's 2 items on here that I would just like to update you on, Madam Mayor and Council. The first is in relation to the concourse trading resolution that was considered previously. So the update we've got on this at the moment is that we've received pre-application advice on this potential development earlier in the year, which is fair to say has presented us some challenges, and we're working through those challenges as officers to understand whether we think we can deliver the aspirations that was talked about at council. We are planning to be able to bring a more substantive item to council in September to discuss those challenges and also to set out some potential ways forward for council to consider and decide upon. I should also note that there is an item, a verbal update later on the agenda this evening. I'm not planning to add anything else on that matter than I have in this update under the resolution tracker. But there is one other item just to update you on as well, which relates to the spoil relocation area. So, Madam Mayor, Council, you'll be aware that we worked with St Albans District Council and Wilmot Dixon to come up with a set of remedial actions on the spoil relocation area in Rothamsted Park. That hasn't taken place yet. It was due to start in May, and I think it's fair to say that I've received an inconsistent update from both partner agencies as to what the hold-up is. Both, however, have committed that the work's going to be carried out over the summer period. However, there is currently a question mark, I'm told, around whether the specification that was agreed previously that relates to digging up and removing all stones off site, whether that is indeed now possible given the machinery that is required for that. So I'm due to have an update with partners next week, and I'll be able to give all councillors an update off the back of that, most likely through the information bulletin.
I just had one thing to ask on page 15 as well, fencing project. It said both sites are currently waiting out from the planning submissions. I think in the bulletin last week there was an update on that as well.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, so we are certainly over the line with one, and hopefully not far over the line with the other. You recall that the reason why we had to go through planning is because the fence replacements are in close proximity to the highway, therefore it's required. We have had to produce a flood risk assessment for one of the particular applications, which is unfortunate but not unexpected. We hope to be able to deliver both of those pretty soon. It's worth adding, Madam Mayor, as you've asked that question, there is another slight increase in the costs to the final phase of around about £1,500, I believe. The resolution taken by council previously was that this project would be funded with the increase in costs in place.
Thank you. Okay, so at 2.1, councillors asked to note 2.1.1, note and approve subject to any comments or amendments for the plan of Appendix A. And 2.1.2, note the resolution tracker attached to Appendix B and approve the removal of these resolutions. Or I didn't offer you an opportunity to add your comments. Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much. I apologise, I'll do this very quickly. On page 13, May, with that change, it will actually change if we agree something subsequent to the meeting. My second point is one I made before on presentation, pages 14 and 15. The way it's printed, you get very, very small print, but where it's a software change, when the text put together, it could be the other way, it could be landscape, which actually is then easier to read.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I think it's fair to say I've heard that message. I also have given that message And without saying any more, it's appeared like this again, so we'll get it right.
Any other comments? Okay, are you happy to take both recommendations as one? So 2.1.1 and 2.1.2, I don't think I need to read them out again. Can we have a vote on that, please? Okay, thank you. So moving on to 8.2 on page 17 of your agenda back. Business plan update, and again, I could ask you to introduce that, please.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I don't have actually anything to introduce on other than what is set out in the report and the appendices, but of course, very happy to take any questions or offer any clarity. And also note that the savings again run a long way in this appendix. And that might be a theme throughout.
Anybody have any comments?
I wasn't proposing to raise that point again this evening, but thank you for the town clerk. What I would say, which is rather tangential, because it's not primarily a Holland Town Council responsibility. On page 19, there's a reference to Holland Common signage review, etc. We have a problem around the town where quite a lot of the signage is out of date, and I'm not referring to town council signage, it's probably county or district. And given that part of the rendezvous of the town council is to try to partner councils to do their job, I wonder if there's something we could do to get that looked at.
That's something we can do.
Yes, so Madam Mayor, it's something that we've raised with partner organisations, district council and county council previously. My only observation is there is a lot of work to do if they are to address a lot of that signage. So we can again raise that with them, and it's very much in their hands to decide what to do.
If there are any particular signs that you're talking about, I imagine it's the leisure centre, EMC, public halls.
The park primarily, yes, but probably others, yes. Yes, and there's still a sign pointing to public halls. Well, what's the point? Yes, okay.
A couple of things on, if I may, page 19, appendix A, in that maintaining concept parks. I think after DSC on Tuesday night, was it Wednesday night, there are a few updates to that, aren't there? I don't know if it's relevant to change those in this document.
So, Madam Mayor, no, so I wouldn't recommend changing them. These were the updates at the time of going for the press.
Any other comments? Okay, so recommendation 2.1, council last to note the high level updates against the business plan set out in appendix A and the capital improvement programme set out in appendix B. Everybody happy to go with the recommendation? Thank you. So agenda item 8.3, the Rothamsted Park flood surface water report. On page 33 of the agenda facts. Again, I could ask the clerk to introduce that for us, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. So this report you have in front of you is a very detailed report that really reflects the work of officers and the task and finish group that was set up by the council at the point of finalising the acquisition of Rothamsted Park. There is lots of detail within this document. I'm very happy to take questions or points of clarity on it. The key points that I would just like to say, Madam Mayor, is that officers in the task and finish group, I think it's fair to say, have gone for a very comprehensive, thorough process to get to the recommendation that is in front of you this evening, which is set out specifically in 3.6. In doing so, we have considered relevant case law and the points that are made within that. We've considered the work that the Town Council has carried out since taking ownership, which has a positive impact on the matter in itself. And we've also carried out a number of additional options appraisals, which have included various flood risk assessment appraisals and thoughts from an external contractor on the likelihood and the potential options for investing more into flood risk assessments and mitigating options in the park. So there is plenty more content in here. I'm not planning to highlight anything else, Madam Mayor, but very, very happy to take comments or task and finish group may wish to add anything to what I've said.
So that's all it is.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Sorry, I'm a bit confused on it, as to whether I should be standing or not. We seem to be doing it both ways.
Normally you should be. Don't mind. Stand up if it let follow formality. But if you would, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, yes. Yes, indeed, it was a lot of work for the last 12 months. With the working party, and I think Paul de Court and Nigel Turnbull. I lost count of the number of meetings, a good half dozen, I'd say. But between the meetings, there was even more work by the town clerk and Sarah Brimley. And you see the results of it here. There's an awful lot of detail, but rightly so. It's rather an important subject. The park is one of our two principal assets, being the common, of course, and it's newly acquired. And yes, occasionally, every few years, there is a flood, and there can be some detriment or risk to neighbouring properties, as has happened in certainly the last 10 years, 2 or 3 incidents. The council does take its ownership responsibility seriously, and it's actually difficult to come to the judgment, because there's always more you could do if resources were unlimited. But actually, do you need to do it? And if you did it, would you actually be moving the problem elsewhere? And that's a conundrum we've been working with. What the town clerk and officers have done over the last 12 months is referenced here, includes getting Thames Water to fix the drains. Yes, they were broken. It included persuading the state to fix the drains on their land, which strictly they weren't obliged to. Thames Water was. Plus some other measures. The consultants who we engaged said, yes, we could vastly increase the size of the dell to make it a sort of holding reservoir or dam, depending on your point of view, and have a channel running down by the avenue of trees and another sort of smaller holding area near the rose garden. And you could increase the existing barrier behind the houses width-wise and height. But actually, that would cost X amount, which they miscalculated, and Carl has recalculated at in excess of 400,000, which was last November's prices, probably a lot more now. So the question is, we could do that, we have the money, are we required by law to do it? And that's why Carl has set out the law, which on pages 46 and 36 is actually not a bad read. And it ends up saying, you're not obliged to take all steps at all costs. It's a balanced duty, a measured duty, as they say, to take reasonable steps, having regard to resources and other, for public authority, other uses of its money. And in this particular case, do we need to spend 400,000 excess? Our judgment on the working party is we're not required by law to do that for occasional flooding, accepting there is a risk. Bear in mind also that were we to protect 3 particular residences, whatever that would be, we would be diverting the water elsewhere into the public realm, Oxford County Council, the highways, and their fire station. So, all in all, our conclusion, having all this evidence and all this work, is we've taken reasonable steps already, rightly so, and not at huge cost, which is good to report. But we're not obliged to do any more. Thank you.
Does anybody have any comments or questions on that report? Okay, there's 3 parts to it. I need to read out the full recommendation.
Yes, but Madam Mayor, I think in this case that would be very useful for you to do so.
So what I think I'll do is take them individually. So if we can, 2.1.1, note the work that has been carried out on the matter since acquiring North Hampstead Park in April 2021. Show of hands on that, please. Okay. 2.1.2, consider the conclusions of officers and the task and finish group set out in paragraph 3.5. Okay, thank you. And 2.1.3, agreed recommendation set out in paragraph 3.6, and I shall read that out.
Madam Mayor, before you do, may I just offer one small sort of editorial correction? I know I suggest what would be a correction, that is on the 5th line it says it's fair, just and reasonable as between neighbouring landowners. I think perhaps what it means is as between the council and neighbouring landowners. Just the sense anyway, but I think it's worth making that clarification, please.
So I'll read it out with that change. So the council resolves, having considered all reports presented to it, that reasonable steps have already been taken and no further steps are required to be taken or costs incurred by the council to further mitigate the risk of flooding of neighbouring land adjacent to Rothamsted Park. Considering what is fair, just and reasonable as between the council and neighbouring landowners, and having regard to all the circumstances, including the extent of the foreseeable risk, the available preventative measures, the costs of such measures, and the resources of all parties, in particular the council being a public authority, taking into account of the competing demands on the resources of the council and the public purposes for which they are held. Okay, is everybody happy to vote on that? Right, we'll move through to item 8.4, change of annual council date, May 2023, and that's on page 165. Are we happy to go straight to the vote on this? Yeah. So the council has asked to 2.1.1 approve the suggested new date for the annual council meeting 2023 of 11th May. Great. Agenda item 8.5 on page 167. Approach to grounds maintenance. Again, I've got the clerk to introduce this report.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. So what you're being asked to do this evening is approve or agree that the officers carry out some detailed scoping as to a future alternative model for the grounds maintenance contract. As the report sets out, we have a hybrid model at the moment, which ranges from a small internal town ranger team through to a fairly large external grounds maintenance contract and some specialist work that we deliver for our management plan. The grounds maintenance contract itself for the town council ends in March 2024. And so now this is a good time for us to consider our options as to whether we wish to continue with the current model or look at an alternative down the line. So there is no commitment to the council this evening other than asking officers to carry out some detailed scoping to bring back in September.
Okay, any questions for us at all at this point? Happy to go straight to the recommendation. So at 2.1.1, agree, council is asked to agree to the detailed scoping of a new hybrid approach to delivering the council's ground maintenance requirements from April 2024. And 2.1.2, request that the town clerk formally notifies SADC of our intention to explore alternative options to the current SLA with them. If we could have a show of hands on that, please. Okay. It's unanimous. Item 8.6. So this is, we don't actually have a flip sheet on this, but it's an AGP, which is an artificial grass pitch, new term for the 3G pitch. And the clerk is going to do a presentation on this for us.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, and apologies to be cryptic if you're wondering what the AGP was. The AGP is the official kind of lingo, if you like, that Football Foundation others and use. And so I'm trying to train myself to start saying that rather than 3G, but I'm sure I will fail miserably in the next 10 minutes or so of presentation and questions. We just wanted to take the opportunity this evening to bring you up to speed as the current position of the AGP, and also put forward a recommendation for potential further opportunity that we would just like to flag to you. So I do have a few slides set out here. So just as a background, a reminder, so the facility that we're developing is a shared facility in partnership between the Town Council, Harpenden Colts and Harpenden Town Football Club. It has primary roles of supporting an increase in junior sport facilities in the town, but also providing fit-for-purpose facilities for the Town FC. There is a secondary aim in there for the Town Council around the ability to generate a surplus to support our own general budget, which we've been clear on throughout. There is a parallel project, which is around the supporting pavilion, which has an emphasis on community use and improvement of servicing the grass pitches, which sits outside of this specific project, but is something we're delivering in parallel. And we'll come forward later in the year with some further options for decision. And just as a reminder, the new facility will be managed and led by the town council. It's fair to say that you'll remember some of these barriers when we first set out on this kind of journey a long time ago. There's 4 key barriers. First was the ownership of the land. So at the time of setting out on this, we didn't own the land, and there was a fairly significant legal liability. We've obviously overcome that. We set up a partnership where we essentially had an organisation underwrite our liability. We had governance arrangements for the facility, which were quite tricky in that there is currently one of the partners has a long lease or a lease on the site. So we've had to develop alternative arrangements around multi-use agreements with them. Secure external funding was one of the key barriers and still is in many ways, because we haven't got over the line with that yet, and it's something that we'll pick up on a bit more in a moment. And then just the small task of securing planning permission. So progress today, excuse the colours, green basically means that we've done these and amber is we're on the way. So essentially the way that it works with the Football Foundation is that you have to pre-register your project, and indeed you have to get it on a district local facility strategy in order to get through the door in the first place. So we've done a lot of work over months and years to make sure that we are high on the agenda for the Football Foundation, which doesn't mean that there's an open goal for funding. Oh, sorry, pun. But it does mean that actually you've got every chance of securing funding down the line. We've gone through a tender process where we've appointed external contractor through the Football Foundation's framework, and that's something that council's considered before. And off the back of that, we have generated, or what's been generated is a guaranteed maximum price of the facility, which is held for a certain period in time that I'll come to a bit later. So lots of progress on those 4 items on the left. We are in parallel developing the business plan, the development plan for the site, all of which has to be submitted to the funders for approval later on in the year. Just to give you an update on the business plan side of things, because I know you'll be super interested in this. The current income expenditure that we're looking at across the 5 years of the first 5 years of the project is set out here. So what you'll see is there is the opportunity for the council to generate a decent surplus for the site. Just made some key points in there that of the income that we've set out in year 1, around £60,000 of that is guaranteed, as long as we don't get any really unexpected lockdowns or anything like that. So 60,000 of the 83 is pretty much guaranteed. We've got a further 22 weeks of income throughout the year that's not really built in at the moment. So there's opportunities for us to widen the usage and increase the income. The expenditure does include a £25,000 sinking fund, which over a 10-year period will give us the funding to replace the pitch. That relates to its lifespan. And we are utilising internal resources for much of the management of the facility itself. So through caretaking, through the town ranger team and others, which enables us to actually keep our expenditure down. So this version of the income and expenditure is the working version. When we submit this to the Football Foundation, it has to include all of the other costs that we are already built in, so for our own resources. So the version that will go later in the year will have a lot lower surplus, but that's just how we have to produce that. Next steps, all that looks awful. So essentially, we'll just skip on to the next slide because these look much better. So we're in the design proposal now, and we are due to go to submit to planning very soon. The idea is that we secure planning as quick as possible. We submit the final Football Foundation funding application in October for a decision in January for commencement of the build by the 9th of March. The crucial thing around the 9th of March, that is when the guaranteed maximum price ends. So we need to have started by that date. I put these slides up here. The one on the right is clearly the site as it is now. The one on the left is as it will look. And as you look at it on that slide, there isn't a great deal of difference, and that's quite deliberate. So the site in many ways visually will remain the same. The key difference in this slide here, as you'll see, the one on the left has got an artificial grass pitch, and which basically means we'll go from a publicly owned facility that can be played on 3 times a week to one that can be essentially, with the right maintenance, played on all day, every day, should we wish to. This gives a slightly different angle, and I will send these slides around afterwards because you can see them a bit close up. But what you can see on the left-hand one here is a couple of the other big changes. So as part of the proposal will be an improved grandstand on the right-hand side and a smaller seating area slightly further down, which does have some disabled facilities. There is a small white rectangular facility on the left-hand image just above the tree. That is a kind of a refreshment tea bacon sarnie type facility that the town council will manage and will have the opportunity to have a good income from. The other thing you may notice from this image is that at the moment the spectator areas are either grass verge or tarpaulin down on the floor in some cases. So this will be kind of a terrace all the way around the facility to deliver the football foundation requirements and the requirements of Town FC, who of course, our key partner. This image here, all this does is serves to show what you probably already know about the site, and that is that it's incredibly sloping from what is the northwest end to the southeast, and that does present two key changes that we have to make to the site. So if you were standing there now compared to when this is finished, the southeast corner will be raised around 66 centimetres, and the northwest corner will be going down about 44 centimetres, which actually will level everything up. So actually, as you're standing at ground level, if you visit the site regularly now, you notice quite a difference. You can imagine that given the lay of the land there is work we have to do around drainage and the use of attenuation tanks, and that's all built into the particular project. There's one more image on this that I'd just like to show, and that relates to neighbouring land and picks up on a future asset transfer as well. So there's two red sections of land on this, one on the left broadly and one on the right. So the one on the right was a retained piece of land from the district council adjacent to the new car park, which is essentially just being left as a bit of a scrub land. It does get maintained every now and again, incidentally, quite often by our own contract. But that's another matter for a different day. We see this land as being crucial to the wider kind of site for the AGP. In particular, we would like to potentially utilise some of it for some sustainable transport options, so cycle parking and other such like. And so we have made a request to the district council to transfer that piece of land, and we're having some informal conversations. Hopefully, we'll get a yes/no subject to legal process we have to go through fairly soon, and then this will be brought back to council in detail to just to confirm you wish to do that. The red land on the left-hand side is the access way up to the storage depot and the storage depot itself. The current legal position with regard to that is that we have a licence to occupy it. We were due to sign a lease, but that was delayed as a result of some other negotiations between the district and Town FC. However, it is in our view as officers, it's a strange piece of land for the district just to be retaining. And so we have also asked the question as to whether they would consider transferring that land, perhaps flipping the relationship where the district council would have a lease on the building in the same way that we were due to have one. That's a rather more complex discussion, I think. The land on the right-hand side should in theory, or could in theory be dealt with by a red line variation to the previous transfer documents, which incidentally is exactly what's happened to delay the lease between the Town FC and the district. So just wanted to flag for your general information on that. So that's the AGP. This evening, also just want to flag a future opportunity or potential opportunity, and that does relate to the existing tennis courts and multi-use games area in Rockhampton Park. Formally, as it stands at the moment, the Town Council owns these. They're currently part of the leisure contract. However, they come out of the leisure contract on the 1st of November this year. So the Town Council does need to consider what it wishes to do with this facility. One option is that we could create a second AGP facility that services a wider range of sports in the town, particularly those sports that we know also have facility issues. Now, what we're asking this evening is not to give any formal go forward on that, other than just the second part of this recommendation here, which is similar to one of your earlier recommendations, and that is that officers go away and scope that option to further develop that tennis court and multi-use games area site, along with a range of different options, and again bring that back to council at some point in the future, likely to be September time. Madam Mayor, I think I'll stop there.
Any comments or questions from anybody?
Yeah, I've got a question, probably because I'm not terribly good on sports facilities. Looking at possibly using the tennis courts for wider use, or making them a, whatever you called it, whatever muggers called that, I've forgotten already. Would they still be possible to use them as tennis courts?
So, Madam Mayor, that's something we would scope as to what uses there could be. The initial answer would probably be unlikely. We would wish to do that if we want to be able to. We would severely limit the opportunity for other sports if there was the tennis court facilities in there already.
Could I ask a supplementary? Yes. So do we have any idea of to what extent that those courts are used to play tennis on as they stand?
I can answer informally, just through my involvement with the leisure centre. They're hardly used at all. Sorry, Councillor Cowley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a potential slight supplementary to Rosemary's question. What sports do we envisage doing on that site that are currently under facilities in Hartland? You referenced, so I'm assuming there was some in mind.
Yeah, Madam Mayor. So perhaps without setting any hairs running or expectations running. So we know that there has been long been an issue of hockey facilities in Harpenden. That's been represented to us many times. We also know that there are many other just general sports clubs that really benefit, and schools and other community groups that currently use Rockhampton Park that would benefit from that facility. The AGP that is going to be put in place will be well utilised. There will still be a Harpenden Colts demand. So actually there is a range of different sites that we could put in there. Partly we want to scope those options out, and that's why we're putting it in front of council this evening. What we don't want to do is carry out a load of detailed scoping for something that council might never be interested in. So that's why we're putting it forward. The reason we're doing it now as well, Madam Mayor, is that there are some funding opportunities out there. And with these funding opportunities, particularly going through another funding process at the moment, now could be a very good time for us to explore this and take it forward should we wish to.
Yeah, I've just got a couple of questions. Firstly, about the fences around the AG. If obviously they have to be quite close, as you can, I can see on there, to prevent the balls flying around. I presume it's got the sort of low noise fencing, which creates a cushion between it, because balls will be clattering into there quite a lot. And that's presumably part of the spec, is it? Because we're just thinking of noise and neighbours. That's all done. And then linked to that is then the spectators. Where do they stand? Behind the fence or just in front? A little bit of terracing. We talked about on the terracing on the sides.
Yeah, Madam Mayor. So the spec for for all the fencing is essentially the Football Foundation spec under their framework, and also meets Football Association ground grading requirements. So there is lots of fencing on these projects. So you can just about see on here, you see the far perimeter fence, which is black in colour here. That's a 4.5 metre fence that has to secure the site. As part of ground grading requirements for the town FC level that they play at, nobody's allowed to be able to see from outside site onto the site when there's a match going on. So we are working on the principle that currently the excellent hedgerows and foliage that we've got there provides the opportunity to do that. So there's no plans to move those. The white just in front of the stand on the halfway line, you can see the kind of that white line going all the way around. So that is a perimeter fence to the football pitch. At the bottom of that has, for want of a better technical phrase, soundproof boarding that does exactly what Councillor Court mentions. So the spectators for Town FC matches stand behind the white barrier as if they would at the moment. And there's space there between spectators.
Between the white one and the black fence between.
That's correct. Okay. Yeah. And so, Madam Mayor, just to add it, because you can't quite see it from this, but I will share that. On either side of the grandstand is actually a tiered terrace now. So where currently the spectators will stand on a kind of grass bund, that will be tiered up. So we'll also be able to stand there along that side.
That's because I'm.
Should I stand up? Where is it? If it's more likely to make it on screen.
It's a sort of discussion. So
Okay, fine. I think when I look at the Wheat Hampstead Tennis Club, which I don't think is a private club, I believe it's a council facility. It's a real asset to Wheat Hampstead and it is used a lot. And I think we should scope it, and I'm not like massive, but I would reserve judgment. But I think it would be a bit of a shame if we lose the facility for people just to pay and play tennis. And I understand that it's not used that much at the moment, but that doesn't mean to say it couldn't be reinvigorated. And we've got the leisure centre kind of facing more that way now. And yeah, it is the private tennis clubs are quite expensive.
I think there are a couple more hands. Councillor Hill?
Yeah, thank you. Just on a couple, well, it's one really quick point, just about the so the trees you see on the left-hand side there. In autumn, they dump a lot of leaves onto what will be a 3G pit. So just when it comes to maintenance and stuff, that's quite a big problem. I mean, at the minute they just will play through it, but on a 3G pit, we want it cleared quite a lot. And then just about you said there's like a little hutch there for catering potentially. Have you discussed that with Tottenham Town FC? Because they have that little clubhouse already, and then on matches they'll do, I don't think they actually do hot food necessarily, but they do, bar services, cheese, coffee, that kind of thing. But I mean, you say we retain that and any money on that. I mean, how would Town FC be okay with that? I mean, I don't know. And then just about the terracing, I think that's a good idea on that far side, just because. And then I'd assume the other three sides don't have terracing, do they? So they're flat because just for disabled facilities, I guess like terracing's not all that inclusive. And then there was one other thing about you saying about the ground grading. I know Town FC have got. I mean, they'd probably quite like to get promoted to the next level above. I've got a season ticket there, so I'm not involved in the management or running of the club. But does it meet the grading for the league above? So is it like Southern League, Division 1, Central Wales? Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. You could give us some answers.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. So in reverse order, so the way that the Football Foundation funding works is that they will only provide funding for the grade that the club are currently playing at. So with this facility, we're trying to future-proof it as much as possible, because Town FC are only one promotion away from going up to the next grading level, which adds complication. So within this spec that you see here, Madam Mayor and Council, this actually delivers on the grading above, should they get promotion. Now, what that does throw up is there will be a dilemma down the line as to how the funding between the add-ons and the Football Foundation, what they'll provide, how that is worked out. And that may require that the Town of Sea or somebody else covers that cost. So the spec here, as you see, does deliver that promotion level grade on that one. In terms of the trees and the hedgerow, so some people say this site has got great character, which definitely has. From a planning point of view, it's incredibly constrained because of the hedgerow. So the commitment we've had so far has been to make sure that the biodiversity, where it's of importance, remains in place. So there's no impact on hedgerows. There's no removal of trees or anything like that. We do have to go through the planning process, and what that throws up, who knows down the line. So what that does mean is we are left with the really tricky maintenance requirements of leaves on pitches. So you really ideally would not want to have to do that. And so that does add to the maintenance, but because of the character of the site, we kind of stuck with that, if you like. And in terms of the point around the commercial side of things, so the agreement that we have with Town FC is that they will be no financially worse off for the period of their remaining lease for the next 7 years. So what that means for them is that they pay very little in terms of hiring for the new facility. They are also allowed to open their clubhouse for when they have got activities going on. crucially, they're not allowed to open their clubhouse for any other times. So that's written into the agreement. So when the Colts are using it every evening of the week, that's when the town council facility would be opened. So that is partly a way to deliver them being no financially worse off. That does create a bit of an imbalance if you were to compare the contribution of Colts financially to Town FC. But going back to my original slides about governance, in order to find a way forward that suits everybody in the context of them having a long lease, that's just something that one of the things that we've come to.
I think it was Councillor
Yes,
Butterworth.
Relatedly, I need to declare potentially a pecuniary interest in living very close to this site, and therefore the amenity of my household and neighbours is potentially affected by increased use.
So, Madam Mayor, just to get, was that a pecuniary interest?
Well, I think it has to be because it's my house.
Okay.
If I understood the rules correctly, town clerk.
Yes, I mean, it is down to individual councillors to decide on their interest. I would add that if you've declared a pecuniary interest, you can't take part in any vote, or you can make a statement on the matter now. You would have to leave the room for the.
That's understood. Next, that you're thinking. I was going to make a minor point in relation to the usage of the Logger tennis courts. And I heard Madam Mayor say that they're not heavily used. That's what the legislature say. Is that because they're not often booked, as opposed to being used? Because the usage can be quite informal without booking. And I just wondered which it is.
My understanding is that they didn't have a tennis program at all set up locally at Harpenden Leisure Centre. So the only users were those who booked it privately, of which there were very few. I understand that the condition of the courts makes them practically unplayable. I know that some work was done this year to clean them and to remove some of the vegetation that was going through and on the courts. I don't play tennis. I haven't been there myself, but that's just feedback I've had. So, and I think lighting as well is requiring upgrading. So yeah, I think work would need to be, money would need to be spent on getting them up to standard, probably, if we were looking to reinvigorate the usage. Councillor.
So Elliswick Tennis Club, if you want to join there at the moment, you've got to wait until 2024. So regardless of the cost, it's at the opportunity as well.
I think Councillor.
Councillor Kelly was first. I have a second question.
Okay,
Please
fine.
go back.
Just for picking up on Harry's point about the grading of the stadiums, are we content longer term that Harpenden Town Football Club will not be promoted sufficiently highly that they would have to move site? Just to thinking about in terms of income and revenue, and or that we could adapt the site if they were to, rise significantly up to leagues.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I'm not sure I can really answer that really. We are putting in place a facility that suits them now and potentially beyond if the funding is there to do that. What happens beyond that, who knows? And not least because, the lease, as part of the governance arrangements for this, they won't have a lease on the site. So whether they have the opportunity to further develop it down the line, and that would be a question for the town council, the Colts, and the town council primarily, to be honest, as landowner. So don't know what their plans are. Hope they do very well, but obviously that's something they will have to consider down the line.
Sorry, just on that, it was whether there's the capacity to do further works that take. I'm not familiar with the gradings in terms of if they were to be, could we theoretically upgrade it to the next level?
Don't know, Madam Mayor, because we haven't studied the grading to that level. I would imagine that the point about constraints that I made earlier on start to really significantly impact. There are some smaller things, like you have to have second turnstile, so that sort of thing could be accommodating. But if you start to get to a level where you require 500 seats, then how would that work? So don't know. I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Court.
Yeah, mine was actually about use outside of the planned use as the town, the football club, and obviously the Colts. Now there's the 22 weeks, which presumably would be available for sort of open hire for, you know, residents of the town and others. Is that presumably an idea you're thinking about? In other words, summer football potentially could be available on that side. And then linked to that, after that, is there any opportunity, do you envisage any opportunity within the 30 weeks for some casual hiring, again, by residents who aren't directly associated with the town or the club?
Yes, Madam Mayor. So in terms of the last point, in the evenings of those 30 odd weeks, then no, highly unlikely there's any opportunity. So Hartland and Colts are taking every slot that Town FC aren't having, and that is purely because the demand is huge, and at the moment they've got facilities out of town, so it's required. And they are also contributing a significant amount up front to it as part of the relationship. So evenings during those peak football season, no. During the day, there is lots of opportunities throughout the year. The things that we are looking to include as part of the development plan. So we're looking at an educational programme linked to local colleges, particularly around academy football or other sports. It will be available for general hire at key times. We will have summer sports camps that are running there on the site. So potentially through an existing partner or a new licensee, they might run that. We're also looking at kind of the social community side. So we want to see walk-in football sessions, disability sports sessions, and other wider use. So we know at the moment that some local schools use Rockhampstead Park for PE sessions and sports days. So there's no reason to say that this facility, once up and running, can't help accommodate that. So it's got a real wide range of community use outside of the core agreed hours between the two departments.
Sorry, Councillor Hill.
Yeah, can I just quickly ask about the sort of day-to-day ongoing maintenance? So that with the landowner, so that will come in-house, we'll sort of maintain it day to day, presumably. And we'll follow up to that if that's right.
Yeah, that's correct, Madam Mayor. So there are two types of maintenance required. So there's day-to-day things, the weekly sweeping, 2-3 times a week you need to sweep. So we could buy in somebody to do that, but actually the town ranger team, that would be built into their existing schedule, or through the partnership with Colts or Town FC, we would look to set up a volunteer scheme as part of that, because they already do have a good volunteer scheme. Then there are some more significant pieces of maintenance that, for the first year, as part of the guaranteed maximum price, you get a contract to come in that does certain works. Years 2, 3 onwards, in terms of the expenditure, has those external maintenance requirements built in. However, there may also be the opportunity to the town council to take those on as well. As part of the facility, we get a ride-on piece of kit that enables maintenance to take place. So again, with the right internal team, we can do that ourselves.
I mean, it's just on like the voluntary, because I can imagine that there's probably 2 or 3 volunteers who I know who currently maintain the grass pitch, who would presumably be happy to do the training or whatever and become like a volunteer, presumably like, you know, lead up to matches or, you know, and then just quickly about, are the floodlights up to are they up to current spec, so they don't need replacing?
Yes, Madam Mayor. So the floodlights have recently been replaced in terms of the lamps, which is a good thing. Incidentally, that was money that came out of the £125,000 town council liability that essentially Hartland Colts have covered in a roundabout way. The proposals at the moment, design-wise, don't plan to change the floodlight columns. Clearly, the ones in the 2 corners that I said are kind of going to be built differently. They're going to, you know, look a bit different in terms of where the land sits. The 2 floodlights in the middle are folding floodlights, which are much better for health and safety. There could be a discussion down the line as to whether we want to replace the 4 others to folding ones as well, which longer term would be could be a good thing for us to do. But that's a conversation later down the line in the tender process, prior to folding them, depending on all sorts of different costs.
Call that item to a close. Did you need us to formally vote on recommendations?
Yes,
Yeah.
Madam Mayor. So it's just that second point there, if you minded to ask us to carry out detailed scoping.
So the recommendation on 8.6 of the AGP facility is to agree that officers carry out detailed scoping of the option to develop a further AGP on the current tennis court Mugger site. I could have a show of hands on that, please. Okay, and that's right, thank you. All right, item 8.7 on page 171, the agenda pack. And that is the written mayoral protocols. Don't know if we need to introduce this at all. I don't think so. I think it's fairly self-explanatory. This is really more for sort of new councillors like myself coming through where we didn't know all the protocols. It's quite handy to have it all written down. Does anybody have any comments, additions, anything they would like to add on this item? Councillor Butterworth.
Thank you. Merely an observation on page 176, the bottom paragraph about they're not being allowed to run channels. That's actually without permission of the that's area being visited. We need to bear in mind that half the park is in a different council area, up in rural, same with Rugby Club, Kingsmore Green, Romsted Manor. But easily get caught out, especially now that the district ward boundaries and the town ward boundaries are not aligned.
Okay. Look, I'm not sure if you've got any suggestions in that one.
No action required.
Yeah, I don't think so, Madam Mayor. I think that's more of a case of us reminding the town mayors at the time when that might be something that may occur.
Any other comments? Okay, if we could then move to the recommendations, 2.1, councillors asked to approve the mayoral protocols attached as Appendix A. Okay, thank you. To agenda item 8.8, the review of standing orders and financial regulations. If we could produce that item for us, please. Page 171.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. So this is an exercise that the council should regularly undertake. And so we've taken the opportunity to do that for this meeting this evening. You'll note that we're also recommending that we in future combine the two documents, standing orders and financial regulations, into one set of rules, partly because there was duplication in each of the documents regarding financial matters, and sometimes inconsistent, so we tried to tidy that up. There is one amendment that I need to just make you aware of, Madam Mayor, and that's on page 194. Under 26 Code of Conduct and Dispensations, that should say, see also Standing Order 1T rather than 3T. But otherwise, Madam Mayor, I welcome comment or points of clarity.
Okay, I ask for any comments. That's work.
I regret I do have some points. And there's no easy way to do this, but I could do it. Some are questions for clarification, possibly, and some are cross references and numbering changes, which are not quite right. On page 181, question G, I'm looking at the red lines instead, and that's directed by the chairman. And this is a member probably speaking in excess of 3 minutes. It wouldn't be direction, I would suggest, would be if it's approved by them. There's unlikely that the chair of the meeting would direct someone to speak, and they approve of speaking if they wish to do so.
So would you just change it to allowed? Is that what you're
Approved, I would suggest, but yes, that's my suggestion. It needs your approval.
How do you do all these changes?
So, Madam Mayor, you can take them as you go along now, and
One at a time.
I guess
Asking if everybody's in agreement with each person.
yeah, that's probably nice.
Everybody happy with that? The word directed to be changed to approved.
On page 182, the rights of a person who attends a meeting. No problem with that, but the implication is that someone who's watching it online doesn't have that consent, which is slightly odd. I'm not sure whether it's intended and whether in fact it's important. Because someone watching online could report what's happening to his or her mate, which would seem to be harmless, no more harmful than someone who's at a meeting. In fact, less harmful because he's not disrupting the meeting, he's not there.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I can be quite clear on this one. So this one is in bold font, so it's legal requirement. It's also taken from the new model standing orders, so I wouldn't recommend any changes to that. Indeed, we can't make any changes to that bold print, so that's a direct link from the new model orders.
I'm fine with that, thank you very much. Page 183, item S, begins 1, 2, 3, but actually the little one is a lead-in. The minutes of the meeting shall include an accurate record of following 1, but it's 2, the names.
I don't think we need to vote on that. I think it's very straightforward. Okay.
2.3, that's in bold, so maybe we don't change it. What's meant by election year? I mean, yes, a year one is an election, but what if it's just a by-election to fill a casual vacancy? Is that an election year, or does it have to be an all-out, or does it matter? Or do we just not change it because it's in bold?
So, Madam Mayor, it relates to a town council election year, although that is bold and legal requirements. So again, we can change it.
2.5, which is to do with the cancellation. And it ends through urgency and lack of items respectively. And I just query the word urgency because if there's an urgency, the meeting should surely go ahead. I think something else was meant. Does it mean emergency, like buildings caught fire or something like that?
Yeah, Madam Mayor. So this is one of the pre-existing clauses in the standing order. So yeah, I would imagine that is to do with the sorts of items that you're talking about there around emergency situations or matters of urgency. More generally, how you define that is very difficult unless we can put a long list. But that's what's intended by it, and that's how we've always applied it. Although I must say, in my time here, we haven't cancelled a meeting for urgency, but we have through lack of items previously.
Strong feeling either way on.
If something isn't agreed straight away, I'm not going to argue for it at this point. That's fine. Thank you. In 2.11 and 2.12, just to note that whether it's must or shall, that's fine. I think shall is slightly better. That is actually an obligation to cast a vote, to exercise a casting vote, which is a little unusual. Normally, it's an option to exercise a casting vote, just checking with the town council if that's intended. And I guess it's involved, it is intended.
Again, Madam Mayor, that's in law now. That change we're in legislation, and it's part of the model.
Page 187, bottom of page 13.1. The record for council and other record for council should be changed by omission of the word for. Page 189. In 18.1, and by the way, I'm very pleased with this extension in the red line. It's not really working and such, so that's brilliant. In 18.1, the stylistic change, the figure 6 have been changed to word 6, which is absolutely fine. But then to be consistent, on line 3, the figure 6 should be changed to the word 6.
Okay.
Then on the 4th line is a reference to standing order 9, which I don't think is a correct reference. It might be 19, it might be something else.
Sorry, Roger, Councillor, could you just repeat that last?
Sorry, on line 4, the reference to standing order 9, I don't think 9 is correct. It's possibly 19. But I don't know.
Question mark over whether this should be all right.
Yes, Madam Mayor, so that should be 19.
Same page 19.3 is the reference to standing order, which I think should be capital S, capital O, but the reference to 9D I think is incorrect.
Madam Mayor, so that is incorrect. I can't place what the reference is now, but if you're happy with me just to insert the correct reference afterwards.
13.4, the question, because it says, "Hence, to consider whether the motion shall be approved in the agenda or rejected." That's black and white. It doesn't give an option that it should be concluded with a modification. Is that intentional?
I think, Madam Mayor, that this in reality will depend on the timing. So if there are still time for the individual councillor to submit a motion in line with the notice required, then of course the councillor could submit another motion with wording that they would wish to.
Madam Mayor, would it be possible for the committee to approve this effectively subject to perhaps either Carl, Roger and yourself meeting and agreeing them? I don't know, it depends how many councillor votes it's got.
Feel these are substantive or not. I guess some of them are irrelevant to go through because the changes I think need to be heard by us. I don't, that's just my view.
No, instead of the time taken, I'm a good halfway through. You can make your.
That's fine, no, that's fine, that's fine. It's just a question. It's just, yeah.
Sorry, councillor.
Oh, it's there's one sort of substantive thing that I might raise, but it's, which might, I'll be interested to hear the views of the councillor.
Okay, shall we finish going through councillor Butterworth's and then we'll come to you.
19.7, the explanation of the officer. I wonder if it should be written explanation.
Don't see any issue with adding it. I guess it's.
You can clarify, Madam Mayor, the fact it will be recorded explanation suggests that it'll either be on a video or written anyway, so whether you want to be explicit.
Any strong feeling for anyway.
Well, sorry, is this meant to be before the meeting, in which case it's easy, or is it meant to be at the meeting, in which case it's writing isn't easy, now let's drop the point. If it could be easier, then let's drop the point.
Well, I think, Madam Mayor, the fact it will be recorded suggests that it will be written if it's in advance of the meeting, so you can be explicit in saying that. But that's fine. In reality, the way in which I would record it, you need to write it. That's fine.
Okay, that's right. That's good. Page 190, motion without notice. I'm sorry, I've not had time to read through this, but I'm not sure that this allows an amendment to be raised without notice. Not sure whether it's intended to or not. Because we do amend the motions as we go along. We're doing that now, effectively.
Yes, Madam Mayor. So, I mean, it's worth saying this isn't a discussion on a motion this evening. This is a question that another councillor also asked. So I believe that earlier on in the standing order still enables amendments to be made to motions. It's referred to earlier on, but I can clarify that afterwards and make it even more explicit if that needs to be. Section 20 directs lift from the new model standing orders. It isn't legislation, it's not bold, so it doesn't have to be written in this way. But that's the reason why that has been changed, because that's lifted from the new orders.
Do you feel the amendments have been dealt with elsewhere in this?
Yes, I believe so, Madam Mayor, but I can clarify that afterwards in stronger terms on here if needs be.
Page 195. So I think standing orders is covered that below. It's saying it's page 197. Let's just get a red line through. After 7, in other words, VII, the next line begins assist. And I think that should in fact be number 8. Little Roman 8. With a capital A. We're likely somebody does this and it turns out all right on the day, but worth catching.
Okay. Over.
Page 201. But 59.11. Shall maintain a record of its processing activities. I think that means personal data processing activities.
Been more involved here, so I'm assuming.
Yeah, so Madam Mayor, it's processing of any information essentially. And it's bold, so it's legislation and model standards.
My final point is a question on 60.2. Comparing the ceiling power, particularly page in area, which is the proffer officer and witnessed by 2 councillors. This is the town clerk dealing without any witnessing, and it's actually intended, so not even the town clerk signs the seal. Which would be odd.
So Madam Mayor, 60.2 relates to the decision to apply a seal to a document. The sealing clause earlier on sets out how we would go about doing it.
Thank you for that explanation. Thank you very much. That's it. I don't have any comments on it, but I can relate.
Councillor Hill, did you still have your?
Yeah, there was one which I was kind of reluctant to make because it's not really it's not an amendment, and I can't really see a situation where it would happen. But 6.1 on page 186, where it says town mayor and deputy mayor are ex officio members of every committee, working party, and forum. Well, I was fine with that, but it's and have full voting rights thereon. I mean, I asked the town clerk about this along with the other clarifications, and I think he said it's like standard for Carrickton Town Councils, potentially. You can correct me if that's wrong, but it just seems to me that you know, currently the town mayor and the deputy town mayor are, you know, they get allocated to what committees they want to join, and I just think it could affect proportionality if one of them turned up to a meeting. You know, if there was a particularly controversial, we haven't had anything like this, but if there was a particularly controversial subject and it might be split evenly or something. I just, from a governance point of view, I just wonder if that just affects proportionality unduly. Because, you know, committees reflect council as a whole, you know, the makeup of council. That's how they get their legitimacy, I see it from.
I don't know if you have any comments on that. I guess, I mean, the working parties and subcommittees report to committees and report council above them, so I don't know if it would have voting rights at some point anyway.
Yes, Madam Mayor. So this particular one, as Councillor Hill pointed out, it's not legislation, it's a local clause. The council can decide whether it wishes to have it or not. Many similar town and parish councils elsewhere have a similar clause. That's not to say we should have one, but it's not required, but it's for local discussion and debate. In theory, it does enable an individual town or deputy mayor to do as Councillor Hill suggested there. But it's up for local discussion for council. Really.
Anyone have any comments on that? Whether we retain it as it is or make changes?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. From a theoretical point of view, Councillor Hill is right. It does potentially change the proportionality. I guess it's a sort of honorific thing, and in practice, I suspect the town mayor and the deputy are far too busy to find additional committees and work like subcommittees and working parties to sit on. So I think there's probably a practical solution to what is admittedly a theoretical.
This is,
Point.
sorry, just
Well,
clarify, it's committee, not just, it says committees as well, so it could be CSC or CPF. Yeah, but I mean, I think, yeah, no, but I think perhaps in your, I think you said subcommittee.
Yes.
And I think Council, Madam Mayor, you might have said subcommittee as well.
Okay. So you're saying they would apply to CSC as well as CPF?
That's how it's.
Yes, I was going to say, I believe, no, I've been through these standing orders. I think any councillor can in fact attend any of the committee, though of course they do not vote. I think that's it. And I think that largely covers the access to attend and offer a view if there is a view. But the risk related to proportionality, I do understand. And to that extent, if we were to delete full voting rights, in actual fact, the whole of the clause then becomes largely irrelevant because they can attend in any case. So personally, I understand that point that any councillor has a right to attend and speak. I would personally be happy to delete 6.1.
Shall we have a vote on this then? I think, sorry.
Sorry, can I ask a question? I'm just trying to think the way that, I should know this really, having been there last year, but the way the council works, do all the effectively the decisions from the committees come up to full council anyway? So it's, I'm gonna say, is it as big an issue as it might be?
Well, no, Madam Mayor. So essentially committees have delegated responsibilities. So there are some things that committees can't decide on. And therefore there's recommendations similar to the year-end accounts item for the CPF this evening. But there are also items that the committees have the delegated power to decide, such as things that were decided CSC this week, like farmers market and other things like that. So yeah, so the decision could be taken by committee that isn't then considered by council without special resolution to undo that decision.
Yeah. Yes, I was going to ask a practical question. If one was to alter that clause, I understand. I've got a question then, would there then not need to be some mechanism put in to how you deal with a situation when you have a deadlock?
Where your mayor has a casting vote.
Yeah.
The chair of the committee.
Well, the chair of the committee presumably asked, but I presume, but if that's the case, then it needs to be covered. Standing orders.
Suggest we have a vote then on.
Yeah, I think, Madam Mayor, a vote in relation to 6.1 in favour of keeping or removing. Essentially, you would need to, if you wanted to remove it, all 6.1, and then I would cross-reference all the numbering later on as well, because that will change.
Councillor Drake.
I was just saying that because I think the point regarding casting vote is legitimate, and I believe that I need cross-referencing to a relevant section, or maybe a replacement clause to say that the chairman or whoever is chairing the meeting would in that case have a casting vote. I think that would then solve the problem.
And then Councillor Lutterworth.
A couple of points on the casting vote. I haven't found it, but I would expect there's already a provision in there. The casting vote of council, and that's it goes down to committees. I agree that's important, but I don't think the presence or absence of the mayor actually is the same point. I think it's a different point. What you deal with the casting vote within the committee. And maybe the town clerk could find the provision that does that. My second point is, and I did agree with Councillor Hill's point on the 6.1, and I'm wondering whether for ease we deal additionally with the second point, or whether he's going to do that shortly, which is 14.1, which has the same effect on proportionality. That will be it by CFC, for example. CFC subcommittee on local policy. It's the same, they fetch exactly the same point.
Sorry, I don't think it is the same point, because we already have that situation. That's done at the start when we get into proportionality. And certainly that was the case. I remember when we started in 2019, and I was told at the first council meeting that all those appointments were made by the ruling party, I believe. That's covered already, but I do think absolutely in 6.1 needs to be there.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, so I haven't found the reference actually to the cast and vote side of things. Now, I think what that means is, I don't believe it's in here. So where it is linked is where it's appointing the chair or the town mayor. So it's very clear on that as to what would happen in that sense. But actually, it doesn't set out in writing explicitly how that would be dealt with in a committee or indeed at council. So having identified that, Madam Mayor, I think that's another thing for council to consider this evening. Having identified that, whether you wish to add a clause in there that says in the situation that there is a tie vote, the chair of that meeting would have a casting vote.
And that's at committees.
So, Madam Mayor, 11.1 says study on rule of debate in the council can apply to means of the committees. So all we need to find, and I've not found it yet, is something which gives the mayor and chair of the council casting vote and that triple stamp election on one.
Yeah, so Madam Mayor, so I think on the same page as Councillor Foster, I don't think that exists elsewhere in the document. It only exists in terms of the casting vote that the town mayor or deputy mayor has in the case of the appointment of the town or deputy mayor. So I think that we need to include that reference earlier on that you mentioned there, Councillor Butterworth, in order to link that to 11.1 and then be sound in that sense. If indeed council agrees that the chair should have the casting vote when the votes are equal.
With respect, which usually means I disagree with you, page 182, paragraph Q.
That's how I've understood it. We've had it in planning before where Councillor Cowley's broken a casting vote, is used a casting vote, and it's not because he's the chair of the meeting. Even if we've had, you might even have the mayor or deputy mayor present in the meeting, but they were just in that meeting seen as just an ordinary member of the committee.
Yeah. That covered it.
So yeah, that's very clear, right? Yeah.
Fine. Okay. So I think what we just take a vote then on page 1. Oh, sorry.
Councillor Cowley to speak.
I was going to speak on a different item.
Different item. Okay, should we conclude on this one?
Sorry, I have one point, if I may, maybe the town closing house officer would clarify for me. Does this review tonight mean that we will no longer have the point raised by internal audit that they have raised for the last 2 years, that we have undertaken a review of standing orders?
Yeah, just to clarify that, Madam Mayor, that's just been a comment that's been in the report. So it's not been a recommendation by audit.
Clearly comment.
Sorry,
Councillor.
just a very quick one. In the event of a tie in a committee that we'll talk about, and it would go to the chair of that casting vote, do we want something, just a question, do we want something, or is it desirable if it was a major decision? I don't know whether something, I don't know, over £50,000 or something that it would come back to council. I don't know, it's just a question, like if we're choosing the ground maintenance contract for the next 15 years or something, maybe people not on that committee. I want to say if it was tied, it's just a question.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, so firstly, an apology. I didn't go back far enough in my notes to spot that it is already covered. But of course, having now spotted that and spotted it in bold, that is legislation. So we wouldn't be able to alter that particular clause. You could, however, put a local clause that off the back of that does reference moving it to a parent body if you should so wish. But from my point of view, the legislation is clear in that, and we would be in danger of tampering with that.
Okay. All right. I think let's go then to page 186, number 6, and we will have a vote on that. So, firstly, in favour of removing 6 from the standing orders altogether. Right. So I think that's unanimous. So we will remove item 6 from page 186.
Oh, sorry, councillor Kelly.
I was going to raise a separate one. I was having one. 56.1. I'm assuming, sorry, on page 200 for everyone, turning the page. I'm assuming that it refers, when it says within the agreed scope, rather than all that, because of the changes to district boundaries that mean that they no longer line up with town boundaries. But is there a definition provided anywhere as to the agreed scope? I haven't found one. And I just think it might be helpful to have that written down somewhere.
Yeah, so Madam Mayor, so we can clarify this further, but what we mean by this is that the agreed scope that the planning committee take when it screens planning applications on the front of the agenda. So that reflects the fact that the planning committee doesn't look at all applications and looks at certain types. So where we're saying within the agreed scope, that's the agreed scope of the screening. We can make that more clear to be explicit on that, but that's what it's there to do.
Okay.
Sorry, just now, Councillor Charles raised the point that what it means is all planning applications in respect of properties within the town council boundaries. I mean, it isn't said, but I mean, that's actually what it means, isn't it?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, that is what it means, yeah, because we only deal with places that. But the additional point is to cover off the.
No, agreed, absolutely, no, I agree with that.
Since last looking at this.
Okay, I think we've got through that. Next was the recommendation on page 179. Council has asked to 2.1.1 approve the revised standing orders and financial regulations that are set out in Appendix A and B, and 2.1.2 approve the merger of these separate documents into one, providing one set of council constitutional laws, obviously with the amendments that we previously agreed. Is everybody in favour going with the recommendation on that? Okay, that's unanimous. Okay. Agenda item 8.9, councillor training, so page 233, your agenda pack. And again, if I could ask the clerk to introduce that for us.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the aim of bringing this item to council this evening is to set out the current offer that we have to councillors for training and development. I should note that later in the year, we will be bringing an item to council around the council induction programme for post the town council election next year. So really two things this evening, one to kind of note the offer that we've got at the moment, but also to highlight or identify any subjects or topics that you think councils may benefit from or be interested in, and just to take any other wider comments, Madam Mayor.
Okay, does anyone have any comments? Councillor Butterworth.
Madam Mayor, just to say, I've started, not finished, but started the online planning training in 4 modules with reference on page 234. And I have to say, it compares, let's say the parish councils like that, it compares very favourably indeed to the in-house training provided by St Albans Council. So I would recommend that for people who need to learn about planning. To improve what they know about planning.
So I've certainly undertaken some of the training with HOPTC as well, and I found it to be of a high standard. And I wonder if there'd be value in actually offering the training courses to the group as a whole. Some councillors are experienced, but I think there's probably something to learn for everybody. So it's something I wondered whether it would be of value.
That is part of induction, if not widely used.
Are there any particular topics or anything that anybody would see benefit in having some training on? Either casting your mind back to when you were a new councillor or as sort of more experienced councillors.
Well, I don't. Yeah, well, it might make sense. I mean, I sit on a lot of other bodies, and I know nearly all of them. You do safeguarding training.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
All of them.
Councillor Cousin?
Planning, I would have thought, would be the most useful because it does change quite regularly. I agree.
Yeah, there's an asterisk item here on Hartland Neighbourhood Plan. Maybe I missed it, but I don't recall being part of any. training session on the neighbourhood plan. I think that would be useful, even though I think there are bits to do with planning. There's quite a lot in that document, and it, as with any lengthy document, it doesn't always mean exactly what you think it means when you read it first. So a sort of in-depth studies of that would be most welcome.
If I can add also, I found with the induction training early on, I, as a mum and what have you, couldn't make some of the training sessions available, having which they probably are now available, recorded afterwards. I imagine things have moved on with COVID. But yes, having the recordings available. Any other comments on that item? Councillor Cowley, you've got your name there.
No worry. Just on that point about accessibility of training, where we can I ask, we try and organise these sorts of things to be in the evenings, because speaking, I'm assuming others as well with full-time jobs, it's quite difficult to attend things during the day.
And training, is the preference that you do it off your own initiative in your own time, or would you like things to be organised as a group and encouraged in that way? Any strong feelings either
So
way?
good both.
Bit of both?
It's without place.
I think the recommendation is just to let the current training officer and agree any additional themes to be included. So do we need to formally agree things, or do you just?
So, Madam Mayor, just a couple of observations. One is we will go and look into the safeguarding side of things. That's not something we've really got reflected at the moment. And then I was just going to add, in terms of the Hartland neighbourhood plan, we are planning to run a session in early autumn around the Hartland neighbourhood plan, both for town councillors here, but also potentially with colleagues over at the district council. One of the things we raised recently with senior officers is how we can ensure that the neighbourhood plan is properly understood when it comes to planning applications, and we have put an offer out to include planning officers in that sort of training with us, and indeed any other councillors. So we will be looking to do something around that in autumn for all councillors here and more widely.
Okay, I think that would be useful. Okay, I think the recommendation at 2.1, so after noting the current training offer and agree any additional fees to be included, so we have to be covered. That's all. Yeah. Great. On to item 8.10, so year-end accounts 2021-22. Mark, are you introducing?
No, Madam Mayor, nothing to introduce on this one, other than to say it's obviously been through Corporate Policy and Finance, recommend the Council Director mentioned at the start of the meeting. So welcome any questions on this one.
Just to repeat the point I made at the CPF meeting, that I think these are an excellent set of results in terms of the difficulties of the year. We've managed to keep the council within the adjusted budget and not utilise the general reserve that we thought we were going to have to utilise at the beginning of the year, leaving us in a very strong financial position at the end of it. So I'd like to thank the officers for ensuring that that's been done.
Any other comments? Oh, Councillor Butterworth.
I think I haven't spent too long on this, but in terms of clarification of what Councillor Drake has said, can I take it that I think we've done well in current trading, and we haven't done well because we've dipped into reserve? I mean, for example, from the sale of the allotments, that's earmarked for capital projects.
I'm not sure that question is directed at myself or the finance officer. I think that we haven't dipped into reserve. The general revenue is not in capital receipts, which is specifically up for capital uses that we determine. And the revised commercial income for the year, officers concur with me, is that we actually achieved the level of commercial income as we projected it in terms of the original, the adjusted budget.
Anything you want to add?
No, I think Councillor Drake. Sorry, my usual typo, we're page 259, middle of the page, the word principal. It's spelled under long-term liability.
Sorry, what are we looking at?
The word principal, page 259, under long-term liabilities, second paragraph.
Yep.
And payments with principal, AL.
Yeah. Okay, so if we go to the recommendation 2.1, sorry,
Right, screen's going off.
Screen's gone to sleep, amazing.
Happy to take those all together. So 2.1.1, note the outturn 2021-22 is set out in section 4. 2.1.2, approve the level of earmarked reserves and general reserves at 31st of March 2022 as set out in paragraph 5.8. 2.1.3, approve the statement of accounts for the financial year 2021-22. And 2.1.4, approve that the statement of accounts be signed by the Mayor and responsible finance officer. We can have a vote on those recommendations. Okay, thank you. On to item 8.11 on page 261, internal audit report 2021-22. Council is asked to review and approve the internal audit report for 2021-22. The conclusion of which was there was good assurance with no recommendations from the council, indicating that there are effective controls and procedures in place for those areas covered by the review. Is there anything to add to that?
No, Madam Mayor, nothing to add.
Okay, are you happy to move straight to the? Oh, sorry.
I'll ask a question, page 267. It looks like there's been missing from the table in that, or just sort of table or ticks or crosses or whatever, make sense of it, but, otherwise, put on many of the financial records, unless there's a problem with black and white grayscale printing, well, it's not good.
Just a case of where the indications are actually.
The CPF committee did note this particular point, and I'll obviously recognise that, and that needs to be addressed going forward. It's largely to do with the printing, I believe.
Obviously, how can we decide if we don't know what the answers are?
Yes, Madam Mayor, so it's good, yeah.
Awesome. Okay.
All right, so recommendation 2.1, council is asked to review and approve the internal audit report for 2021-22. We have a vote on that, please. Okay. Unanimous. 8.1.2, annual governance statement 2021-22. No, so any comments at all on this item? So we'll go straight to recommendation 2.1.2.1. Council is asked to 2.1.1 approve section 1 of the annual governance and accountability return setting out the annual governance statement for 2021-22 as detailed in paragraph 4. I need to read paragraph 4 out.
No, you don't make any.
And then 2.1.2 approves that the annual governance statement is signed by the Mayor and the Town Clerk and submitted for audit. Can we have show of hands on that, please? On to 8.1.3 annual governance, page 275, annual governance and accountability return 2021-22. No. Any questions, comments? No. Go straight to the recommendation 2.1. Council is asked to 2.1.1 approve section 2 of the annual governance and accountability return 2021-22, setting out the accounting statement for the financial year ended 31st of March 2022. 2.1.2 approve that the annual statements 2021-22 be signed by the Mayor and responsible finance officer and submitted for audit. 2.1.3 notes that the annual internal audit report 2021-22 section has been completed. Okay, that's great. Thank you. Item 8.14 on page 285, Treasury Management and Investment Strategy 2022-23. And again, any introduction, anything to add on this report?
The only thing to say here, Madam Mayor, is this is a referral previously through CPF earlier on in the year. So this and the last item on the agenda this evening, we've got a report is something that CPF previously considered. They don't have delegated responsibility to agree it, so that's why it's been recommended to council.
Okay, fine. Comments on item 8.14? No. Sorry.
Is it clear what the changes are from the previous year's report? Otherwise, I'm not quite sure what we're. Are there any material changes from previous? No?
There were no material changes.
No material changes.
Okay, maybe another year that could be stated in the.
Okay, so recommendation 2.1, council is asked to approve the Treasury Management Investment Strategy for 2022-23 at Appendix A. We have a show of hands, please. Yes, thank you. 8.15 on page 193. Review of internal control and internal audit arrangements. Again, any questions or comments on that report? Okay, we'll go to the recommendation. 2.1, council is asked to approve 2.1.1, the attached review of internal control and internal audit arrangements. 2.1.2, the level of town council's fidelity guarantee insurance of £5 million. Show of hands, please. Okay. 1.6, we were going to, you sort of covered off in your.
That's correct, Madam Mayor. Essentially, we covered that verbal update in the resolution tracker at the start of the agenda.
Okay, I think that concludes our meeting for this evening. Everybody.